Hello and welcome to Go Your Way. I am your host, Phoebe Goh, and I am joined, as always, with Darnell Fatigati. Hey, Darnell.
Hey, Phoebe.
Hey, I was reading the new cloud complexity report because NetApp just released it, and it's really interesting. There's lots of great stats and figures in there, which I know you're going to love getting stuck into, knowing your love of data, Darnell.
And surveys, customer
surveys. Yes, 1,500 people they surveyed across IT just to understand, how complex is cloud, what is going on. And it turns out that like 98% of executives of businesses have had this challenge with cloud complexity and, it having an impact on their business. So it's a very timely. But for today, I think we should chat to one of our partners to see, what's really going on in the cloud world. So I would like to introduce you and everybody in our audience to Adrian Hall. Yeah, Adrian, who is a co-owner of Citrus Consulting down in New Zealand, one of our great partners there, and I love catching up with you, Adrian. So welcome to Go Your Way.
Yeah, thanks, Phoebe. Hi, Darnell.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and about Citrus? Maybe.
So what it's named after, yeah. So it's the question that nobody seems to ask straight away. Citrus is named after a place in Waiheke Beach in New Zealand. It's a little holiday town, and we have a house in Citrus Avenue. That's it. That's the only reason it's called Citrus Consulting. We were sitting in the house one day and trying to decide on a company name, and either my wife or daughter said Citrus Consulting, so we did that. What does Citrus Consulting do? We're a NetApp Gold partner. We are now Lifecycle certified as well. So we've been doing NetApp stuff as a company now for about 8 years. But I co-own the company with Kevin Rapps, and both of us have been around NetApp technologies now for about 20 years. So we've been doing this stuff for quite a while now, and both of us have been in the IT industry for close to 40 years.
Wow. Yeah. So you would have seen a lot of change, right, in that time?
Yeah, a lot.
So back when I was in Down Under in Australia and traveling to New Zealand a lot, cloud was really just that nascent topic, right? It was this thing that was coming. I think they just put in some regions into Sydney and into Melbourne, and we started talking to the cloud providers at NetApp. Obviously, that's changed a lot in the last 3, 4, even 5 years. What's the state of cloud in New Zealand right now? What do businesses feel about cloud?
So the state of cloud is still the same in New Zealand. There is no public cloud here at the moment. That's coming. There's a lot in Australia now. We've got the eastern region, we've got the western region now as well. Even got the southern. But cloud is coming here either late this year or early next year, depending on the timings of Azure and AWS. But the state of cloud really hasn't changed much. But the key thing that happened here was COVID. As COVID hit, everybody went, we need to go somewhere. They stopped capital purchases and jumped into the cloud. Whether that was in Australia, whether that was further in Singapore, some people have done it further away in the US with their parent companies, all that sort of stuff. So, and then there's the local cloud providers like ourselves. So, we've just been helping people put their data in the right place.
And I imagine that's been a really huge. I mean, you mentioned COVID. Obviously, that kind of kickstarted a lot of organizations' journey to the cloud, no matter where they were or what their previous opinions about cloud was. Okay, so I guess what would be a really nice topic to start with is what happens when you're starting a cloud journey, whether it's for the first time, like some organizations were during COVID, or maybe it is a restart where a company might have tried it and thought, oh, this isn't for me, and pulled out. So what are your experiences with those companies starting the cloud journey? What kind of conversations are you having with them?
Yeah, so a lot of it is around cost, but one of the main things we're seeing is just people want to get to the end of their life of their equipment they already own, and then they're trying to decide. They bring up the cloud first sentence a lot, but nobody seems to want to say what they want to put in the cloud first. We try to tell them that if you can use it with a web browser, then put it in the cloud, that sort of thing. So applications such as Xero, for accounting, or MYOB, that sort of thing. All that sort of thing that you can just use as a service. You don't have to pay anything apart from a dollar subscription every month. That can go first. Email, easy, gone. That's Exchange Online. That's Office 365 or M365 now. That's also Gmail. But after that, then we're seeing people either go boots and all in, and then running back out again because the cost was too high, or they're going gradually in as their equipment in the data centers ages out. But what we're seeing is a lot of people are going boots and all in, but then they're repatriating again back to New Zealand with 50 to 75% of their workloads, where they're keeping stuff in the cloud, which should be in the cloud, but stuff that should never have gone there is now coming back.
Yeah. What do you see though as like one of the main drivers in the US when we did this survey? Actually, no, we did a global survey. We saw that flexibility was like by far the main reason. It sounds like maybe in a more nascent market, it sounds like for you guys, cost might be the driving reason. Like, do you see flexibility being one of the key drivers as to why they want to move to the cloud in the first place?
Yeah, flexibility was one of the main reasons, as well as cost. What we saw was, people would talk about the flexibility of the cloud, but then generally wouldn't use it and then get stung by the cost. We're going to spin up all of our test dev stuff. We're going to switch it off at 5 o'clock. Then we forget to switch it off at 5 o'clock. So we're paying for 24/7, that sort of thing. Backups to the cloud. So just the flexibility of being able to not have to buy a massive array to put your backups on or whatever. You're just backing up straight into Blob or straight into S3, that sort of thing. So very simple workloads to start with. And being, like you say, being flexible, being able to switch things on and off when you want to.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was interesting you mentioned as well, like starting the cloud journey happens often when you're kind of ending towards the end of your life cycle of your data center, your equipment. How long, like if you were to say, the expectations of companies when they're saying, okay, I'm planning my cloud strategy, what is that strategy? Is it like well, my data center is closing at the end of this year, get it out of there into the cloud? Or is it, are we really seeing 3 to 5 year strategies? And if so, what's the difference? Like, what is a good strategy from your experience working with customers? What does a good strategy look like? What's that timeline look like?
The best strategies we've seen are the 3 to 5 year ones. We've had 2 customers that have done we're closing down the local environment because it's out of date. We need to renew it. So we're going straight to the cloud, and they jumped in, everything in. We're now helping them back out again with bits of it. But the 3 to 5 year guys, the ones that take the time to work out what needs to go. And like I said, if they go to Office 365, if they go to Gmail, those sort of suites first, then they're moving their accounting packages to being online. Then they're moving other services to being online, such as CRM and the day-to-day management of the company. But they're not shifting all their virtual machines directly into the cloud because, lifting and shifting VMs, as we know, it's much cheaper to do it back either in your data center or with a local provider. So, we're seeing people slowly bring those workloads back out again or take their time to put them in as they need to, moving to Azure AD away from just the Microsoft AD on site, that sort of thing. So just doing things gently and making sure that the cost is right at the time when you're going.
Yeah, I like that. Being careful with your workloads, not just tossing it over the fence.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's why we hear so much about the journey, right? Everybody talks about the cloud journey. It's not a once and done, right? I mean, this is planned for a long haul. I mean, what should customers expect in terms of like, how should they be thinking about this? Should they be looking at 3 to 5 years? Could it potentially be longer?
Oh, absolutely. It could be longer. It could be the fact that you never move 100% of your workloads. You could be moving anything from 75% down to 25% of your workloads out of your environment and away to some form of cloud. We've been working with the guys in Australia around what we're terming not just public cloud, but multi-public cloud and multi-cloud strategies. So it's, you're not just going to the big 3, you're going to multiple places with your data and using tools to make sure that they're all talking to each other properly. And it includes being on site as well.
Yeah, I think that's the important one when you have those multiple clouds, is having them be able to operate in a way that seems, that doesn't actually increase your complexity by a factor of, how many clouds you have, or even exponentially. So, hey, so one of the big things you've mentioned it. I mean, right at the very start, you talked about cloud cost. I think that's a huge topic for everybody, especially now, looking at what's going on in the rest of the world. How do you plan for cloud costs? What do you recommend?
So the easiest way to try to plan is to go to the cloud calculators, and when you go there, you're going to work out how much your workload will cost. And if you're shifting a server from here to a cloud, you'll get a cost. It will give you an average, global average cost of how much it costs to run that server outside of the actual monthly cost of renting that virtual machine. But knowing your workloads, we're using tools, things like Cloud Insights on customers, just to make sure that we're measuring what they're doing for 30 or 60 days in their environment, to work out where we can put their data and where we can put their workloads. So it's getting the planning around that. We can export that data for them. We can present it back to them and say, this workload should be left here. You really just need to stay in your office because you need it here. This workload goes to a public cloud. You choose the public cloud. This one should go specifically to Azure because they've got this service. This one should go to a local cloud provider.
Yeah. It's like the calculators on their own aren't enough, because they don't look at the whole picture. They really do kind of look at a service or a product that is running in one cloud provider, mind you, as well. So you mentioned right. Cloud Insights, obviously, had a great NetApp product, yay, plug, that can look at the baseline, of a workload and over a period of time, like you mentioned. So, a 30-day period seems like a reasonable, idea of what this is typically doing, including, some bursts and peaks and backup windows and so on. So how do you, so you export that data, from looking at the baseline, looking at what else is going on, and then it's really your experience to say which cloud provider it's best in, and working with the customer on that. Do you find are there any tips for figuring that out? What workloads work best in Azure and AWS?
That's the hard one, which is best for it to be put in. I mean, we go into some customers and they've trained themselves in AWS. They haven't trained themselves in Microsoft or GCP, so they have no experience in the other one. So, and we're the same. We try to make sure we have a general understanding of all three. We can't be an expert in all three, but we go to customers and they've decided to be an expert in one. So they then almost pointing themselves down that direction. We're trying to say to them, you need to know what's going on in the other clouds as well, because your workloads could quite easily be better off in AWS instead of Azure. So we've had one customer do that recently, where they decided to move 300 terabytes of data. We'd say, stop, that's egress fees.
Yeah, that's another big cost there. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
What about, do you see?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, because you made me think of, our customers, like, sort of understanding what data they have before they move it. Like, how are they going about their data migrations? Are they just taking everything that they have on-prem in that data set for that workload and moving it into the cloud? Or
some have done, some have done, but most have been fairly sensible about the way they do things, which is, doing it in a considered way. Take a workload at a time and move it to the cloud in a fairly sensible way, which is, try to make it as simple as possible. So if there's a service available for it, then use that service. Don't try and build your own service, because that's just going to cost you more than doing it down in your own premise.
Yeah. Are there other workloads that you see that are, well, I mean, what are the best workloads for the cloud? You mentioned obviously SaaS and PaaS services in the beginning, but okay, beyond that kind of thing that we're all using Office 365 or Google, we're using one of those SaaS services. We're probably already using things like SAP, like in the cloud as a service. Yeah. What about the applications? What about user data? What do you see the best workloads for cloud in those initial workloads?
Yeah, the ones that are that are cloud native, we're still seeing as the best ones. So people are moving, things like, simple things like SQL. Don't just lift up a SQL server and take it to the cloud. Look at whether you can use SQL services in Azure, because you may get better cost savings. You're not running a VM as well. You're just using the service. So all things around that. So there's any kind of application you've got, if there's a cloud native version of it, then it makes sense to move to that, as long as it's got everything you need in it. We've had some people who've got applications on site that they've modified so much. I was going to say so badly, but it's to their own ends. That's right. Yeah. It's how they want it. But when you go to the cloud version of that, it's nothing like it. None of the features they've now designed around it exist in the cloud product. So they just have to be careful around that sort of thing. Just lifting and shifting SharePoint after you've done a load of stuff to it here isn't going to make SharePoint work for you in the cloud.
Yeah, I hear that a lot actually with a lot of the services. It's got the same name, so it must be the same, but then it's the differences that you get caught out on, and that's what you don't want to hit after you've already done that big, I've moved all my data, my 300 terabytes of databases into the cloud only to realize that it's not going to work for me in that particular service, and I need to reconsider. So definitely something to keep in mind. I know I've heard a lot about databases. I've also heard a lot about authentication services. They can be really different. And that those are the complex ones. All right. So any other, I guess, like tips for somebody who is, in that reinitial stages of the journey, what would you recommend to them to think about as they start this journey?
Yeah, there's two ways that people are doing this. There's the new starter companies who are just going cloud first with everything, because they start the company up. They don't want to buy infrastructure. They're just going straight into the cloud with everything and designing everything, doing things like the applications that they want to use. When Citrus first started, we had nothing. We had no infrastructure at all. Everything was cloud-based. But as we've got bigger and bigger, some things have had to come back to being used inside the office. So we've brought stuff back to either local data centers or back to our local office. The other kinds are the guys that are doing the cloud journey from, it's a 10-year-old company. We've got a massive amount of data. We've got a massive amount of VMware. What do we do? Planning is the key here. I spoke to a CIO not long ago, and he said that he wasn't doing anything until he got a project manager for cloud. That was it. He wanted a project manager. He basically wanted a handbrake to stop people rushing in there and doing the shadow IT thing, making sure that workloads weren't being spun up everywhere by everybody and cost was just blown out. Do it in a considered way.
Yeah, that's I like that, a handbrake for the cloud. Don't just dive in without checking the depth first.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's some really, really good advice. Darnell, what do you think?
Yeah, I think people have had to deal with sprawl, right? At least, sort of if you look at this from a global perspective, started out with maybe test dev environments, right? So you had pockets of people just swiping their credit cards, right? Remember? People just use their own private personal credit cards because they weren't approved by the company to go out and use these external resources. And then, that just started to grow and grow. And then you're dealing now with sprawl and things that are probably still out there that you don't even know about.
Oh yeah, that cloud complexity starts.
Complexity, right? The complexity just keeps growing and growing, and so maybe the handbrake idea is probably a good one. Although I may be a little bit too late. Maybe for you guys, you can get ahead of that, but I think in some of the other it's too late.
Yeah, we had one customer here. Well, they were a prospect. They went into the cloud with just about everything. To do with their business. So the corporate side was left here. Everything to do with the business side was put into the cloud. And it was only when they started getting, multiple tens of $1,000 bills every month that the board went, who signed off the cloud strategy? Nobody. It was just, we've now gone.
What strategy?
Exactly.
That's right.
Just like sort of, your hybrid cloud, we used to talk about your hybrid cloud by accident, not by design. And it doesn't really, it's not a strategy. It doesn't, sort of meet your goals. So now you have to sort of rethink that. And that's maybe where some of that repatriation comes back in. Yeah.
I really like that one point. And just one final thing before we let you go, Adrian, which was around that more, so it's not public cloud, but more private cloud and working with partner clouds. Something I read earlier this week around, cloud providers not even having the infrastructure to run things like AI. They're running out of capacity, so that people are going locally, and they're realizing that they don't have to necessarily run everything in the public cloud. Just a couple of words on that. What do you think about that? Do you think that's that it is a future strategy for a lot of organizations to have some, like, not necessarily their own private cloud that they're running in their data center, but one that they're working with a partner and having that managed service cloud-like experience? I mean, public cloud experience, but not necessarily in one of those big cloud providers.
Yeah, correct. I mean, that's absolutely what we're trying to do with everybody that we deal with. It's a multi-cloud journey, which is your premise, a cloud provider, maybe locally, and the public cloud. It could be a mixture of all those three. It could just be all of one. And we've got all of those. We have one customer who, I think I mentioned, a customer with 300 terabytes worth of egress. They were going to move from one cloud to another, one public cloud to another one, and they'd actually replicated all of their data to us. We go, no, stop. So we've got a copy of your data. We'll put it into Azure for you. Don't you take it from AWS and put it there. Just things like that, making use of where the data is. We've basically, over the last 4 to 5 years, just before COVID, luckily, started to build a cloud environment for our customers. And we're slowly seeing people repatriating the boring workloads out of the cloud, the stuff that, just the really boring stuff, the stuff they don't need to be having the cloud, the stuff that's just costing more up there than it really should do.
Right. To your point, earlier, Darnell, perhaps not taking advantage of the agility, or doesn't, a workload that doesn't need the agility of the cloud would make sense in a different environment.
Yeah. And you may be more willing to pay more. So if it is more costly, Adrian, to your point earlier, that, they were surprised by the cost, you don't mind because you're getting the value out of it, right? Because at least you're getting more, greater agility and flexibility. So it may cost more, but it'll be worth it because it'll, give you some sort of a business outcome that you're looking to achieve that you can't do otherwise. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So coming back to the point of, test dev workloads up in the cloud, having the agility to be able to power those off at 5 p.m. automatically and not worry about the cost between 5 p.m. and 7 a.m., that sort of thing. Whereas if you're leaving it with a local cloud provider, we're just charging you a monthly fee. We don't charge it by the hour. We charge you, by the month for a VM or whatever. And generally the cost is less, but the agility is less as well. So, you get much more agility in the cloud to do your thing. The agility that you lose, you gain in the cost of putting the boring stuff with us.
Yep, lots of calculations to be done. It's great to have partners like Citrus Consulting helping NetApp customers along that path as well. Thank you so much for joining us, Adrian. I learned something. I hope our audience did too, and it's just great to chat to you and hear about what's going on in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, it's been great to be here.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Oh, Darnell, we need to build a calculator for this one day, you and I.
Oh, if we could,
it'll be the world's biggest calculator.
Yes, exactly. I think that would be a great service to many people.
Yeah, I mean,
these discussions, it's so funny that we're here, now in 2023 and we're talking about this. Like, I remember having these discussions back in 2012. It's sort of like, it doesn't change. It's just sort of like the problems are still there.
And
the same questions and the same strategies, and what should we put where, and how much should we be spending, at what point do we bring it back on-prem? So I think it all comes down to just really planning and thinking about this and having good reasons to do what you're planning to do.
I would say as well that a lot of companies across the spectrum have also gotten a little bit more intelligent. Rather than trying to replace the public cloud services, they're augmenting them or building services that help you be more successful across multiple clouds. So, whether you're building, like Adrian said, an adjacent, a different kind of cloud that doesn't provide as much agility but gives you more cost flexibility, or whether you're a vendor, whether you're a vendor like NetApp who's trying to, help you get the most out of that, make that a little bit more seamless no matter where you are. I think that kind of flexibility and learning and innovation from the rest of the industry has kind of shown up and caught up a little bit with the way that the hyperscalers really took off and created a whole new industry. So
yeah,
we'll have to watch.
And I think that's also the popularity of hybrid multi-cloud, right? It's like being able to get the best of everything, but sort of, bringing it together, so that you can leverage different technologies, different platforms, different services, and move things around as, you need to leverage them. Yeah. So we have come very far, for sure.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we're not having the same discussion again in 10 years, Darnell. But this is all we've got time for today. And this has been such a fun conversation. A lot to take away, a lot to think about. Definitely have a check out of the NetApp Cloud Complexity Report. And we'd love to keep this conversation going. So find us on LinkedIn or on Twitter. We're both there and happy to chat about starting that cloud journey, or how far you are along on that cloud journey. So find us next time on Go Your Way. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Phoebe Goh, and this is Darnell Fatigati. We'll see you next time. Bye.